Hello folks, we're back with part 2 of a multi-part workflow series on processing deep space images with PixInsight, and let's get started. I'm going to take you to share my screen and take you to PixInsight, which should be there. And in part 1 we blinked through the images, showing the need to look at our data and to delete any pictures that are obvious rejects, both in the supporting files, flats, bias, flat darks, and flat frames, as well as your subs, your light frames. Now I no longer do any manual calibrating or registration or integration of images. The only thing that I do apart from the weighted batch processing system is drizzle my images. But let's go through the weighted batch processing script, and to do that, let's go up to script and let's select batch processing, and then at the bottom of my box is the weighted batch processing system. And let's delete. It brings up the last video, and let's delete those pictures, and let's load the by the way, when you select down here save frame groups on exit, then what this will do is when you bring up the weighted batch processing script, it'll keep loaded your last session, just in case you decide to shut down. Now, one of the things that I do is I save my projects, and because I can't always complete the workflow in the time I have allowed. So I'll save the project, and then later that day, that week, I can bring that project up, and it will load everything that I've done to date. And when we get finished with this workflow, we will save this as a project, so that when we do part 3, we can load the project and pick up then. I'm going to load my light frames, and because I have HA and S2 and O3 images in a directory, I'm just going to go ahead and click on directory. I'm going to go to July, and by the way, I keep my images. This is what I took in January, in February, in March, May, June, and July. In the summer months, I just have fewer nights without the threat of thunderstorms, so I don't get to image too much. And this is not 4 imaging sessions. This is the imaging session with the StellarView 70T, and this is the imaging session with the 625 Vixen, because I imaged with 2 telescopes that night at the same time, but the same target. One a very, very wide field, and the other wide field, but not quite as wide. I've also imaged the sun in July to get that spot, and I had to retake flats for both the 70T and the Vixen, because I took the cameras off, and both of them, and cleaned out some of the optical train. With that being said, let's go to our lights, and let's find our lights. And I have 130 frames, and it brought up the HA, the O3, and the S2. And let's load. I'm just going to click on files. Now, while I'm on that, Um, if your pictures are saving the metadata in the image files, and if that can be read, and if you're using one camera and not multiple cameras, then you don't have to click on bias or darks or flats. You can, and then just load the bias, darks, and flats. But you can just click on files, and I want to go back to 2021, and let's go to July, and actually I need to go to my supporting files, and I'm going to find the 70T, and I'm going to look for darks, and they were 180 second. I keep a library of 15 second, 30, 40, 60, and so these are 180 second darks that I took in all three bands. So I want to load my darks, and we can see our darks there, and here are our lights, and as I mentioned, they're all 180 second exposed images. And let's go get our bias frames. 70T bias, and I'll don't really need 50, but I'll use all 50. Now, there are folks that are trying to suggest, and I know they're right, but I don't see it, trying to suggest that using bias frames with the CMOS cameras that I'm using is a mistake, that I need to take flat darks, and that if I did take flat darks, and I do take them, because I wanted to compare to see if the flat darks and or the bias if there's a real significant difference in the images, and I can't see it. There may be, and I'm just missing it, but I don't see the difference. So the flat darks take a little more of an effort to take than do the bias, so I'm just using bias frames, and until I can see a difference, I don't see any point in taking them. So I'm using bias frames, and I think all we need now are flats, and I retook the flats. So let's go back to let's see, I need to go on back to the July and get the flats for the 70T here. Now, I didn't separate these out. I need to do that. The first 50 are looms, and I don't need those. And the second are HA and S2. So let's bring those up. And then the only thing I'm missing, let's go to our flats. I have the HA and S2, so the only thing I'm missing are the O3s. So let's go down. Let's see it. Here's O3. And let's load those. So I have my HA, O3, and S2. I have my darks, I have my bias, and I have my lights. While we're on the lights, I'm going to leave linear pattern of subtraction apply. I'm not going to add a rejection limit. I'm going to leave it just the way it is. I've put the exposure tolerance on 0. Now, if my darks were, well, I'm not even going to go there. Just put it on 0 unless your dark frames, unless you're going to use the same dark frame for all your images. Let's say you had an HA dark frame, an HA of 180 and you had O3 of 100, but you wanted to use just one dark frame, say for 180, well then you'd have to have an exposure tolerance of 80 seconds if you in that case to use one dark frame for all of them. But in this case, I just leave mine set at 0, and I always manage to have darks for every exposure. If that makes any sense. Cosmetic correction. I have a template that I've created for cosmetic correction. It's right here. I can't open it because I have the weighted batch processing script open, which makes opening any of your processes, you can't do it. Under weighting parameters, they have options for nebula, galaxy, cluster, and by the number of stars. And since it is based on the number of stars, don't be confused in thinking that if your lights are lights of a nebula, you should pick nebula, or a galaxy, or a cluster. If it's a cluster you're shooting, that has nothing to do with it. I just kind of picked the middle of the road galaxy, and it's worked for me so far. I don't change these numbers at all. I wouldn't know how if I did. I wouldn't know what to change them to. Then let's open up image registration. Back up just a second. Yeah, image registration. And since this is wide field, I've been told I need to click on distortion correction, which I do, and I leave everything at their defaults. And close that out. Under image registration, I have nothing to change there. And again, I really wouldn't know what to change because the weighted batch processing script takes a long time to complete. Even if you just use, say, 10 HAs, 10 S2s, and 10 O3s, it takes a while to complete it. Making a change and then seeing the outcome and measuring it, making another change, and it would be so time consuming. I'm just trusting the defaults and trusting other YouTubers who make the changes and can tell me what difference it made. So I'm being lazy. But this works, so I don't see a need to change it. Could it be improved? I'll never know until it's brought to my attention, because I am not planning on changing it. Alrighty, the only one other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I've got generate Drizzle data checked. Now, if you're not going to, if you're not oversampled, don't worry about it. If you are, then you want to check it. Let me go to, that's my granddaughter. My daughter-in-law's garden, but let me go to here we go. Let's go to pixel scale. This is a good tool available if you haven't already found this in astronomy tools. And what you can do is you can add your telescope, and I'll go down to stellar view. To the bottom, and it's the 70T, and I do have a reducer flattener. It's a 0.8. It reduces the field of view to about 80%. The camera is the ASI. It's all the way at the bottom. 1600. Where are you? 16. There it is. And it has a pixel scale of 0.233. The pixel size, you can see, is 0.38. But what it's telling me in my scene conditions is that, because my FW, my full width half maximum, is in the 2 to 4 range, and what it's telling me is that I am undersampled. So I have slight undersample. If I took off the reducer, which I'm not going to do, but if I didn't run one, I'd be in ideal range. But when I add the reducer and go even wider, then I find myself with those pixel issues relative to my star. So I am undersampled, and that is the reason why I drizzle. So let's get back to Pix. So I click Drizzle Data. Now I'm going to go to the control panel, and recently, this is a new feature in the weighted batch processing script. So far we're looking at the pre-process information. The post-process information kind of gives me a summary of 60 frames for HA, 35 for O3, 35 for S2, they're mono, and they're 180-second exposures. We have a total of about 6 hours of imaging time, and so that kind of gives me the summary. And then also, if you're inclined to see or look at the method by which your light frames are going to be calibrated, you're going to subtract from the light frames the master dark and add back your master flat after it's been calibrated with your bias frame, so that you'll end up with a calibrated light frame. You can see the flats are going to be calibrated by subtracting the master bias, which Adam Block calls the master bias your sensor's electronic signature, which is that makes sense to me. And of course the flat darks are again your electronic signature. So again, I'm using the bias, and I don't see a change or any effect on going back to the flat darks. Alrighty, we'll run diagnostic. I think if this was a one-shot color camera, an OCS, a DSLR, then you would click on the color filter array, but it isn't, so we don't need that. I keep all of these checked. I want to see the rejection maps, particularly if I start running into problems. Otherwise, I don't need them. I want to save the process log. I've always clicked. I don't know why I don't even know why it's here, but up bottom fits. I don't know why I wouldn't do that. I just don't know why. I would like for somebody to explain to me why I wouldn't check that. And then include the file path to detect the masters so that you can use them again when you're shooting 180-second exposures in narrowband. Then we have to find a place to store our output. And so what I'm going to do, I've already created for this, I've already created a place for project and a place to store our information. So we're going to pick, actually I'm going to pick a third place, and let's call this, well, I picked it and then I clicked it and I messed it up. Rename 3. Alright, and that's where all this will be stored. And we're going to go diagnostics again. It's going to tell me, well, I think I did the first time. It's going to tell me that I'm missing, it's actually telling me that no master dark will be used to calibrate the frame, that a master bias will be used instead. And that's because I don't have the flat darks. And that's okay. That's exactly, we know that. So we're going to click run. We're going to get the same message. We click continue. And this is going to take a while. And we're actually done with running the weighted batch processing system, and I will be back with you for part 3, and we will be taking a look at our data and applying a linear fit and a crop to the picture. So with that being said, I'm going to bid everybody a good rest of the evening or morning or whatever time you're watching this, and see you in part 3.